helplessness is your best friend, savage.
UAV recon standing by.
Ever since I became a Z-list internet celebrity, I've been asked a lot of questions. Technically, that's not too different from the way things were before, except now the questions come from fans instead of, the police.
This isn't funny!
And among the most asked of all those questions, one tends to stand out. Mr. Overthinker, why do you hate first-person shooters? I've put off answering it for long enough, but since I'd rather do it now than waiting to do it a year from now on the now inevitable occasion of Nintendo giving in to fanboy bitching and making me trudge through another Metroid Prime game...
Fuck you, the Metroid Prime series was awesome and Metroid Other M sucked monkey balls.
Okay, let's do this. Let's get the formalities out of the way first. I don't hate first-person shooters. I don't hate any genre of video games, with the obvious exception of racist flash games posted on neo-Nazi websites. I don't particularly enjoy first-person shooters or gaming in the first-person perspective in general, but the hate is going too far. I like many games from many genres, as do most of us, but come on, we all have our favorites, right? And in the interest of full disclosure, here are mine, in order of most loved to only...
For the sake of brevity, I'm skipping this part of the video.
Now, even someone who'd never seen this show before could look at that list and with some deductive reasoning tell you why I didn't get into first-person shooters in the first place. I'm all about old school, and I grew up on consoles rather than on PC.
Yeah, again, he's sucking his own nostalgia again, I see, so nothing's changed there.
In other words, neither the PC shooter era nor Xbox Live, the two driving forces behind the rise of the FPS genre, were part of my formative gaming experience. I get that, and I also get the place that the early FPSs have in gaming history. When 3D polygons were still a new trick graphic engines were learning, walk through a corridor and shoot things was the first real way to show it off, and for a while it gave PC gaming a solid non-sim genre that it was always consistently better at than console.
You know, I'd like to also point out there were other genres that were more popular on the PC. The King's Quest series or anything produced by Sierra Online was pretty good, because if you ever played King's Quest V and then played the NES port of King's Quest V, you'd know what I'm talking about. Basically, King's Quest V didn't have any of the music, voice acting, and looked like it had been basically made on the NES.
And being primarily on the PC for so long, it's the genre that pretty much made online multiplayer. So when I say the FPS is largely responsible for most of the worst trends in gaming, I'm mostly talking about the modern state of things within the last decade or so. I'm not necessarily trying to run down the whole genre as though it doesn't even deserve to exist.
Bullshit.
But when I think of the things that are just killing the creativity and diversity and soul of this medium, I'm thinking of things like the obsession over graphics, the obsession over brown and gray realism in graphics, the overemphasis on online multiplayer over single-player campaign or even local multiplayer, and the general rotten, hateful, antisocial tone of online gaming in the age of Xbox Live.
You know what the funny thing is? I've played countless hours of online games, and I have yet to experience one person who has insulted me or been generally rotten to me as a whole.
And yeah, you can blame all that on the dominance of the first-person shooter genre. Face it, at this point we've pretty much perfected the gameplay mechanic of walk around, fire, gun.
I could say the same thing about any genre. I could say the same thing about Mario. You've already perfected walking to the right and walking to the left and trying not to get hurt. I could say the same thing about RPGs or online RPGs. It's a matter about context or even the whole plot of it all, or likable characters, or a kick-ass soundtrack, which actually Call of Duty actually has a pretty good soundtrack.
If you can license the Unreal Engine, most of that work is already done for you, so there's really nothing left for the genre to improve on other than obsessing over who has the most detailed textures. Graphical refinement is pretty much all there is now.
I'd also like to point out point-and-click adventures from Sierra Online were pushing graphics back then. If you ever played King's Quest 3, you know what I'm talking about, because there were two versions of King's Quest 3 made. One that used a better engine, which allowed them to have more movement with the character sprites and background, and so the background would also move at times, and one that didn't. And guess what? The one that had all the fancy graphical engines, which when you look back at it were slightly below average the Super NES, but anyway, that, you know, it's all first-person shooters' fault that we have graphics over gameplay is bullshit, and it's a blatant straw man.
It's also essentially the perfect genre for console online multiplayer, because it features both anonymity and the satisfaction of hypermasculine violence, catering to exactly the type of person that has the demeanor, inclination, social skills, and psychological state to be hanging around Xbox Live being assholes to people all fucking day. Playing an FPS online with a headset is like being inside an anthropomorphized message board forum. It's what 4chan would be inside the Matrix.
Yet again, I have played countless hours of video games online, and I have yet to experience any major harassment or anybody being like that. So either it's a blatant straw man, or these guys are so few and far between that even I haven't come across them. And honestly, he's making it sound like it's all first-person shooters. I'm fairly certain if you go on World of Warcraft, you're going to get assholes and elitist assholes, which Bob Chipman does act like. So what, do you want them to stop making online RPGs, or stop doing stuff that you don't like in the world? I'm very sorry, but the world does not orientate around your small-minded opinion.
Right down to the vague intimations of sexual assault launched by 10-year-olds with no real concept of what they're talking about. And since that aforementioned audience is the same type that thinks anything not built around pandering macho bullshit is gay,
you know what, you might as well cut the video right now, put on a big lab coat, and start saying, if you like Call of Duty, you are...
You are stupid! 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 And don't forget, you are stupid!
all that texture detail and graphical finesse only ever goes toward crafting the blandest, brownest worlds possible. How am I supposed to look at all that and not conclude that overall the rise and entrenchment of first-person shooters hasn't been a net negative for this medium? And no, Portal and Half-Life are not enough to excuse everything else.
A quick mention on first-person shooters that aren't grey and brown military shooters. You've got Deus Ex, Dishonored, Bioshock 1, 2 and Infinite, Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas, Elder Scrolls, like Oblivion and Skyrim. And that's just off the top of my head. I'm fairly certain if I actually put some effort into it, I could come up with other first-person shooters.
But that's all academic now. It's been at least a decade of the FPS being the dominant gaming genre, so why have I still not embraced it? Well, that's a good question. For me, it comes down more to the shooter aspect than the first-person aspect. Don't get me wrong, I've got nothing against guns. I like to play war games, I like water guns as a kid, I'm sure I'd enjoy paintball. But when it comes to diving into a digital alternate self for purposes of escapism, sorry, Soldier was just never big on my fantasy list.
Are you so selfish and so self-involved that you can't let other people enjoy a genre of games that you don't like without either castigating them all as stupid, or without saying that it's killing an industry that you only have a partial love in?
Actually, let me rephrase that. Me, myself as a soldier, was never on my fantasy list. Being, say, John Wayne, John Rambo, Duke, Dutch, hell yeah. But me, myself, crouching behind a rock waiting to get my head blown the fuck off? No thank you. That's for braver, better men than I'll ever be. So that's definitely part of it. The first-person perspective is supposed to make a game more immersive, but for me it has the opposite effect. I know these aren't really my eyes or my perspective, because my perspective wouldn't be staring over a gun sight. My perspective would be fleeing madly in the opposite direction.
Coward.
But fighting or shooting or jumping or whatever in the third person, that's paradoxically less immersive but more involving for me. In both styles, I'm constantly aware that the me isn't really me, but at least in the various types of third-person gaming, I'm able to see my guy, and in the best scenarios, give a shit about what happens to him, her, it, whatever. So it stands to reason that maybe I'd be more into a first-person game that wasn't a shooter, right? Well, maybe, but first you'd have to find one.
Well, you've got the Stanley Parable, Minecraft, farming sim is technically all in the first person, although it goes into third person when you enter a vehicle. And also, I dare to mention this, the piece of shit Gone Home first person that doesn't have any action. And I'm fairly certain there's a couple others. I think Dear Esther is a first person game that doesn't have any action in it whatsoever, so I have no idea what he's talking about. Also, Slender Man, that's another game that happens to be a first person that doesn't have any shooting in it. So I have no idea what he's talking about, that there aren't any first person shooters that don't have any action or shooting in them.
How many first-person games are there that don't have you looking over the gun the whole time? I can only think of Mirror's Edge, technically a first-person platformer, and if you play it, you know why there aren't more first-person platformers. It doesn't work.
I personally think if they just cut all combat and had you just running all the way through, it would have worked a lot better. Just they had to shoe in some action in it.
And this, so far as I can see, is the dirty, uncomfortable secret of the whole thing. The first-person perspective in gaming only works for shooters. Let's get real about this. There's a reason virtual reality hasn't taken off yet, and it's not all the Virtual Boy's fault. Immersion is all about artificially engaging the senses, and humans have 5.
Actually, we have 20 senses. You know, we have thermoception, your sense of heat. You got your pain, hunger, balance as a sense. So honestly, I don't know what he's talking about. Maybe he's being generally ignorant like usual.
5. Taste, touch, sight, sound, smell. As of right now, even the most sophisticated simulation can only accurately engage 2. Sight and sound. That's why trying to do anything other than walk forward, point, and shoot is such a huge pain in the ass in first-person games. It's not at all a close recreation of what it's actually like to move around in the world.
So as any other game isn't a realistical portrayal of how to move around.
You can see your surroundings and hear, at least what the game wants you to hear, but all the other things we use to move around, like feeling the ground under our feet, the weight and pull of basic gravity, the touch of objects around us, even the general physics of balance, they aren't there. Now, third-person games don't engage those senses either, but they compensate, in effect, by supercharging the sense they do engage. Sight. In first-person games, not only are you numb to the world and selectively deaf, but your eyes remain locked in your skull. In third-person, on the other hand, you can see everything. You, i.e. your character, can see all angles around them at once. And while you don't have touch to gauge balance or spatial relations, you can see the strength and speed of your own actions and calculate the plausible movements that way. Think about it. Can you imagine how much more capably you'd move through the world if you could see yourself from above the whole time? We'd all be ninjas. Is this just my opinion? Well, yeah, but you know what? I think reality actually backs me up. And for proof, I'd cite the first-person shooter genre itself. Ask yourself, if I'm wrong and the first-person perspective isn't at best inherently limiting and at worst inherently flawed for almost anything but shooters, or, to be fair, stuff like Myst or Shadowgate where you're basically quote-unquote walking through a bunch of still photos, why don't they make more first-person games that aren't shooters? Well, consider the core of my argument, namely that because games can only engage 2 of the 5 human senses, okay, 2.5 if you've got a rumble feature switched on, and therefore an out-of-body perspective paradoxically offers superior control of the digital self by drastically expanding the reach of vision. Said another way, gaming in 3D controls best when there's a character on screen, like say a plumber, or a ninja, or a Hylian elf boy, or maybe a gun. And there, my friends, is the genius inspiration that allowed Wolfenstein and subsequently Doom to overcome the inherent limits of making playable 3D games in the first person in the first place.
I'd like to also point out Doom was originally going to have a character on screen, but they couldn't because of technical limitations and the fact that they didn't have enough time to make a character sprite, so essentially they just used the gun instead, so it saved them a lot of time and money.
By actually making 3D games in the third person, but having a gun barrel as the player sprite instead of a character. In effect, creating a first-person experience by illusion. Ask yourself, and be honest, how many first-person shooters would have their core gameplay changed 1 iota by replacing the gun with, say, a hovering bullet-shooting robot of some kind?
So he's admitting right now that this video is entirely pointless because he doesn't like Call of Duty. He just might as well have just renamed this I don't like Call of Duty because it's somehow destroying the gaming industry, because it's somehow selling, somehow making money, which are then probably using to push into stuff like the Skylanders series, which is bright, colourful, and has unique characters.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And that, my friends, is why I have absolutely no problem declaring first-person shooters as a whole to be the most played-out, self-limiting, creatively stifling game genre other than sports sims, which is a whole other show, and declaring its place as the go-to genre to be the worst thing that's happened to the industry since E.T.
A big wooden cross. So every time you feel unappreciated for all your sacrifices, you can climb on up and nail yourself to it.
It's a big, swirling black hole that's dragging the whole damn video game universe down with it. Yes, that's just my opinion. No, that doesn't mean all FPS fans are bad people. Calm the fuck down. The bad news is, I don't know how it stops. Right now, there are probably more people in the consumer public who are looking for a combination chat room shooting range, and nothing else,
You're a fucking idiot.
out of their consoles than there are any other kind of gamer combined. That's the gotcha at the heart of the growth of the medium. Gaming didn't break out in the 21st century because Joe Sixpack and Jane Winebox suddenly realized the inherent awesomeness of Simon, Rock, and the Brothers. It broke out because Doug Douchebag, Middle Management Mike, Unemployable Eddie, and Parolee Pete decided that teabagging noobs was more fun than their previous methods of venting, like shooting squirrels at the dump or collecting DUIs.
You are stupid. 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 And don't forget, you are stupid.
Say what you will about the Wii, but as far as I'm concerned, it's done something close to holy work just by existing and establishing a fresh, firm connection between the gods of the Golden Age and the next generation. Yes, and also the next generation's moms. Do you even want to imagine what our world would look like with only these guys' hands on the wheel? I have a bad feeling that the only hope of ending the reign of the first-person shooter, which, by the way, would actually help the genre along with all the others, would be for some other hobby to come along and pull Restraining Order Rick and Dishonorable Discharge Dave away from gaming. As for what it'll be, I don't know.
Anyway, I have nothing other to say than, in my opinion, he might as well just say that he was being a condescending cunt in this video, because he just might as well have spent the entire video saying, if you like Call of Duty, you are stupid, you are stupid, and you are stupid. And don't forget, you are stupid if you like Call of Duty. Which, honestly, not liking or liking a video gaming series does not make you smarter or more unintelligent than any other person in the world. It's probably understanding why you like it or why you don't like it, which will probably make you a more intelligent or less intelligent individual. Anyway, I've been rambling on long enough. I'll see you all next time.